special Heroin in the Suburbs.
The use of the drug has
heroin
been on the
today,
rise.
largely in suburban America, places that have done
national
fairly well,
survey shows its
middle
use
class,
has
upper
doubled
middle
since
class.
The use of the drug has been on the rise.
Another young victim of the
And it's in towns
heroin-gripping
that really never
communities
had a
across the
problem with
state.
heroin
Nearly doubled in just the past 3 years.
It's naive to believe that heroin and used in
Staggering
certain
new
ways
evidence of an overdose epidemic in
heroin users
Massachusetts. Nearly
has nearly
200 people
Suburban
are dead
junkies
in the last few
hysteria
months.
tonight.
As lawmakers are really trying to expand the use of 85 families
People
across
need
the
to know
state
that
have
it
felt
affects
that
all
pain,
walks of life,
and that number
rich,
doesn't even
poor,
include the state's
right?
three
It's just
largest
not
cities.
Even more surprising may be the face of the new addicts.
21 years old and smoking as many as 100 hits
The
of
idea
heroin
that
a
heroin
day.
addiction is reserved for the inner city is wrong.
I would describe myself as a people person. I'm a medical assistant, so I love to work with patients all day and went to school at Bay State College so I could help people and work with people, and that's really what makes me happy, specifically kids. I love kids. I love working in pediatrics. So basically, as long as I'm around people and I have friends and family around me, that's when I'm at my happiest. Well, for me, I know personally I started using drugs when I was about 14. So when I was in high school, it was basically just an experimental phase. Like I would do anything and everything I could get my hands on, whether it be ecstasy, coke, I would be drinking on the weekends, smoking weed. But when it comes to heroin, that didn't really come into play until I was about 18. And we had a loss in the family, my grandmother, who we were all really close to. I had been using Percocets on and off before that, and somebody had introduced me to heroin, and after that, there was no turning back.
So my name's Christina Horta. I'm 27. Grew up in Newton. My dad's Jewish. Wealthier, well off. I was raised, very well. So when I was introduced to the streets, it was a rude wake-up call. I started experimenting with drugs when I was 14. I had a significant trauma in middle school. I lost like 6 people in 2 months. Or less than that. One day we couldn't get coke and someone owed me and my boyfriend money and he paid us in heroin. I fell in love with it. I've been a heroin addict for 4.5 years. Started when I was 23 with the Oxycontins and the Perc 30s, and then when they got rid of those, they made generics that you couldn't sniff anymore. About 2 months later, I started using needles.
I've been a police officer for over 35 years, and I've been a drug detective for over 26 years. And for the past 26 years, my whole focus has been working drugs, and heroin is now the #1 drug. And at a time when I first got on the police department, heroin was the most expensive drug that was out there. Marijuana was your cheapest drug. Now it's completely flip-flopped. Marijuana is now your most expensive drug, which a lot of people find that hard to believe, but it is. And heroin is very, very cheap. It's the cheapest drug you can buy right now. You can buy a $5 bag of heroin. You can buy a $20 bag of heroin. It's going to last you longer, and you're going to get the same high. It's just as good. And the first thing they usually say is, I don't like needles. I don't want to shoot. Well, you don't have to shoot heroin. You can snort it. And that just started the downflow. Eventually, you go to the needle. That's usually what's going to end up with people overdosing. And eventually, if you're snorting enough heroin, they'll always end up going to a needle. I've had more people say to me, I never thought I'd use a needle in my life, and here I am using it.
John was someone that I don't think anybody could have a bad thing to say about him. He was the guy who would give you the shirt off his back. He would help anyone that needed it. Just all around a really great guy that everyone always wanted to be around. He could always make you laugh. He was just a great guy. Before we started using drugs, I mean, our relationship it was like we fell instantly for each other. We had this really strong bond that not many people have with each other.
Hello, I'm here to talk about my son. He was normal, he was athletic, he was handsome, he was tall. I just want to say that no person starts out in their life as being a drug addict. Before they're a drug addict, they're normal. As a teenager, something traumatic happened to him. We weren't sure what it was, but he changed. He started hanging around with bad boys, and he started doing drugs. And he progressively got worse. He dropped out of school. And at some point, it was too much. He moved out. And in order to support himself, he sold drugs.
And what happens with a lot of kids when you've got to come up with money every day, you either have to go shoplifting or you steal. And most of these kids didn't grow up, they're not thieves, so they end up stealing from their family.
Over the course of the week between John and I, we probably had over a $2,000 habit. You have to always make sure you have money. So, I mean, we had both of our incomes, plus, you know, we had taken things from my family. We had pawned all of our jewelry. You know, just, it was no way to live. It was absolutely no way to live.
So they're always constantly hurting the home life.
My mother gave me a very good upbringing. There's a lot of love in the house. I just choose to hang on street corners and waste my life, you know. Year 1988, I began to realize that I had a major problem with heroin.
When I was using, it was like at first it was like, you know, everyone says like euphoric, like you feel really good, like there's no better feeling, and it helped you forget about all your problems.
If I felt stressed out, or even if I was happy, if I was sad, it didn't matter what mood I was in, it was my go-to thing. You don't really feel anything, you just kind of numb out, and it's, you know, you just feel so comfortable, like you're snuggled up by the fire on a winter night with a warm blanket wrapped around you, and you just, you know, are about to fall asleep. That's basically what it feels like.
But what happens when you do that is all your problems build up and build up and build up, and you're ignoring them and you're ignoring them, and eventually, you know, you're gonna have to face them one way or another.
It's just like being in a depression, really. It's your whole life, and it makes you forgetful, makes you sad, makes you feel like you've wasted your whole day, you've wasted the whole month, you've wasted the whole year, the whole summer, everything, just because of that.
But the misconceptions are, the biggest thing now is the heroin epidemic is affected everybody. Heroin is available so easily nowadays. Years ago, you had to go to Boston or you had to go to Rhode Island to get your heroin. Now the heroin dealers come out into the suburbs.
I mean, this isn't just, you know, New England, this isn't just Mass, it's not just Rhode Island, it's not just Brockton, it's not just the places you specifically hear about that have a problem, it's everywhere. I mean, it's in the nice towns, it's in the bad towns, it's all over the place, and unfortunately we don't hear about it until somebody dies. I think they're starting to realize that, but we're not quite there yet.
If we keep focused on the fact that they're, you know, human beings behind these challenges, then working with the legislature, we'll get it right.
Going back over the years, a lot of the heroin users were just referred to as junkies. It was somebody that you really didn't even want to shake hands with them. You were afraid you're going to catch something.
I think back in the day, you know, people hear heroin addicts and they think it's, oh, someone who grew up in the city and, you know, a poor neighborhood and bad upbringing, and that's not the case, because, you know, I have a wonderful family. I have a loving family. I have a nice house, nice place to live, always had a roof over my head, always had parent support, went to a good school. I mean, it's just, an addict has many different faces, and that's what people don't realize.
I got a phone call one day from my son. He was playing basketball for Cathedral High School. He was a point guard. He was in his 11th year, and he called me and he asked me to do him a favor. He asked me to stop coming to get his basketball games. He said I was an embarrassment to him, and for the first time in a long time, I was 48 years old and I was homeless, and I started taking a real honest look at my life.
And he asked me if I had a cigarette, and I said no. I said, I have a $20 scratch ticket. I'll go get you a pack of cigarettes. And I went to the store, and it would have taken me 7 minutes. So then by the time I got home, I was gone 15 minutes. I got out of the car, and I could hear screams and screams and screams, and I ran around the house. And there he was hanging, and his girlfriend had him around the legs trying to hold him up. And I ran in the house to get a knife, and by the time I got back, the neighbors had got there and they cut him down. It wasn't pretty. It's something that'll never leave my head as long as I live. He said to me one night, he said, "Mom, I have a cancer. And if I had real cancer, everybody would support me, everybody would be there for me, everybody would care. But when you're a drug addict, it's a disease, and nobody wants you around. Nobody wants to help you. Nobody wants anything to do with you. They don't want you around their family, their children." He says, "But it's a disease, Mom."
I used while I was pregnant. My daughter was not addicted. I didn't have a habit. I overdosed while she was a newborn, and I was found in the street. Someone had just pushed me out of the car in the street on their way to wherever, and then a few days later I overdosed in the house. And luckily, because my mother had temporary custody, my daughter was not taken away. I ended up homeless, and it's a whole different world. You meet people that you would never ever associate with. Those people that are standing outside of 7-Eleven, pacing back and forth, talking about things that you don't understand, are people that you are sleeping, near in the middle of the night. I have seen so many overdoses. I've given CPR to so many people. I brought them back, luckily, every single time. But to see somebody die in front of you is horrifying.
I had gone into a rehab program through McLean Hospital. It was originally supposed to be for about 2 weeks, and John was supposed to come visit me on a Sunday morning. My friends were going to go pick him up, and they were going to come up and see me around noontime. The night before, John had gotten dropped off at his house probably about 9 o'clock. And I was calling him around 9:30 because I talked to him every day. And I was calling him, and I had this gut feeling something was wrong, because even when he's sleeping, he would always answer his phone. He would always wake up. And I called my friends that had dropped him off, and I said, he's not answering. Do you think everything's okay? They said that they thought he must be sleeping because he said he was tired. And come to find out, when they went to go look for him the next day, he still wasn't answering. I had them go look in his window. He wasn't on his bed. The grandmother finally answered the door after them being there for a half hour, ringing the doorbell, trying to get in, and she said, "Call 911. And John was on the ground, and he had probably been dead since about maybe a little after 9 the night before. I'll never forget that day for the rest of my life. I've never screamed that loud before. I've never felt anything like that before, because you never think it's going to happen to you. You never think you're going to lose your best friend, the person who you were going to marry, the person who was always there for you. He was like a perfect fit for me. I've never had anything like him before. And to lose him feels like losing a huge part of me.
I haven't found it necessary to go back and use heroin, and I don't have a desire to use heroin. Although I'm not responsible that I got this disease, it is my responsibility to do something about it. What I have a desire to do is help somebody else get off the drug. And it's hard work. It's not easy, you know. It's not easy at all, but it really, really is worth it.
People are always asking me, like my doctors and stuff, you know, why don't I have any cravings? Why don't I, you know, miss that life or think about it? And a huge part of that, if not the whole part of that, is because of John. I mean, he died, and that could have been me. That easily could have been me. You know, if I wasn't kept at rehab after I found out he passed away, I probably would have come back home and tried to use and tried to do something stupid because I couldn't even bear with the thought of living without him. And now I look at it as he would never want that for me.
And now, you know, I can work. I'm a waitress, and that helps fill up my schedule. On top of the traveling time, there's just no way for me to even use if I wanted to.
So now I just basically focus every day on my sobriety. You know, before I didn't know if I could get through this. I couldn't imagine living a life without drugs. And now I can't imagine ever going back to drugs.
I can live somewhat normal now, and that's probably the best thing, you know. It's mini miracles, little mini miracles for me every single day, and I have to always keep the positive things in mind. Always keep them up front and forward, you know. I can see my daughter. My parents still pick up the phone. I have a job. I can pay for things. And it's a conscious decision now, because if I get high, I'm just going to lose it all over again.
I think it'll forever change the way I live the rest of my life because, you know, now everything's different because you really never know what's going to happen to you. You know, every day I try to go out and do something for myself or do something for someone else. I spend time with my friends more, my family more. Just every day, try to make yourself smile and try to laugh because you really never know what could happen.